Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. In this video we are going to apply what you've learned about conjugating regular ER verbs in the present tense. Remember that we have three different types of infinitives, AR, ER, and IR verbs. So I do have separate videos on how to conjugate AR verbs and IR verbs in the present tense. You can find those by going back to my channel homepage. And remember that the present tense is a very powerful thing in Spanish. When you conjugate a verb in the present tense, it can have three different meanings, so it's very important and very useful to know how to work with the present tense in Spanish. Remember that you can watch the grammar tutorial video. You should also study the topic in your textbook, and you can also Google the topic and you'll find some videos on YouTube that explain how conjugating ER verbs in the present tense works. When you're ready to practice, then come here. That's the purpose of this video, is just to help you practice a little bit. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a little bit of review before we jump into the practice. The first thing is, remember, you cannot get around memorizing the present tense endings for ER verbs. So these are the endings for ER verbs in the present tense. You'll want to be sure you associate each ending with its corresponding subject pronoun. So that's part one. The second thing is you have to know the process of conjugating a verb, the mechanics of it. It's very simple. You start with your infinitive, which ends in ER. Remove the ER, and in step 2 you find your root. This is the root here for the verb comer, which is to eat. And in step 3, all you have to do is pick your subject pronoun and then add that present tense ending to the root. So for example, if I want to conjugate comer and I want to say I eat, well, the ending for I is O. So I add that to my root, which is this here, and you get this here. You get yo como, which can mean three things: I eat, I do eat, or I am eating. And again, it just depends on the context of the sentence, which meaning you get. Okay, so let's go ahead and start the practice part here. How would you say I eat eggs, I do eat eggs, or I am eating eggs? It's just one form in Spanish. ¿Cómo se dice? Como huevos. Como huevos. I eat eggs, I do eat eggs, or I am eating eggs. If you want to make a statement using tú and say you eat beans, how would you say that in Spanish? ¿Cómo se dice? Comes frijoles. Comes frijoles. You eat beans. Remember, you do eat beans or you are eating beans. Comes frijoles. If you want to ask someone, do you eat vegetables or are you eating vegetables? Comes vegetales? ¿Comes vegetales? Do you eat vegetables? Are you eating vegetables? ¿Comes vegetales? A statement. You eat bananas. Plátanos or bananas? Usted come plátanos. Usted come plátanos. You eat bananas, you do eat bananas, or you are eating bananas. Usted come plátanos. How would you ask someone, do you eat grapes or are you eating grapes? Grapes are uvas. ¿Cómo se dice? ¿Come usted uvas? ¿Come usted uvas? Remember, in a question, normally we invert the subject and the conjugated verb form. So the conjugated form comes first, then the subject pronoun. So literally, eat you grapes, which means do you eat grapes or are you eating grapes? Now, if you're interviewing a patient and you keep asking them questions and you're using usted with your patient, it's possible at some point to just leave it out because if you continue to ask questions to that person and you're not changing the subject, then you can leave it out. So you could say at some point, come uvas. Come uvas. How would you say the patient eats a lot of meat, or does eat a lot of meat, or is eating a lot of meat? El paciente come mucha carne. El paciente come mucha carne. In the case of el paciente, if it's not one of the subject pronouns like yo, tú, usted, él, ella, and it's a noun like this, the patient, you would have to decide which subject pronoun would substitute for that noun. So if I said the patient eats a lot of meat, another way of saying that is I could say he eats a lot of meat. The he substitutes for el paciente. So we do the same thing in Spanish. It would be él come mucha carne. So in other words, the form that you pick is the same as the él for el paciente. The nurses eat salads. The nurses do eat salads, or the nurses are eating salads. ¿Cómo se dice? Las enfermeras comen ensaladas. Las enfermeras comen ensaladas. The nurses eat salads. The nurses do eat salads. The nurses are eating salads. Las enfermeras comen ensaladas. ¿Cómo se dice? The patient eats a lot of apples. The patient does eat a lot of apples, or the patient is eating a lot of apples. La paciente come muchas manzanas. La paciente come muchas manzanas. We eat ice cream. ¿Cómo se dice? We eat ice cream. We do eat ice cream. We are eating ice cream. Comemos helado. Comemos helado. The doctors eat soup. The doctors do eat soup. The doctors are eating soup. Los doctores comen caldo. Los doctores comen caldo. The doctors eat soup, they do eat soup, or they are eating soup. Los doctores comen caldo. Do you eat lettuce? This is the plural you. ¿Cómo se dice? Do you eat lettuce? Asking more than one person. ¿Comen ustedes lechuga? ¿Comen ustedes lechuga? Do you eat lettuce, or are you eating lettuce? ¿Comen ustedes lechuga? Okay, so now that you're comfortable conjugating ER verbs in the present tense, again, this is just to remind you now what you can do. If you see a list of infinitives like this, a list of ER infinitives, you can conjugate them. So for example, if I wanted to say I read, well, that's leo. I do read, I am reading. Or we read, leemos. We do read, we are reading. Or they read, ellos leen. Aprender, to learn, I learn, yo aprendo. He learns, él aprende. We learn, nosotros aprendemos. They learn, ellos aprenden. Beber, to drink, I drink, yo bebo. You drink, the informal one, tú bebes. We drink, bebemos. Comprender, I understand, yo comprendo. He understands, él comprende. She understands, ella comprende. And so forth and so on. So now that you know how to do this, you can conjugate all of these verbs in the present tense, and you can begin expressing many different ideas. Okay, so I hope you're excited about your ability. It's really growing by leaps and bounds, especially when you know how to conjugate verbs. My advice to you is always pay attention to the verb conjugations. Whenever the topic is a verb conjugation, a different verb tense, if you really learn how to manipulate those verbs, that is like the backbone of your language, because we have to have a conjugated verb to have a complete thought in language. So you can really do a lot with verb tenses, so pay special attention to them. Okay, well, that's it for this video. Have fun speaking Spanish.